Hi, welcome to another episode of On the Mark with Mark and Mike. I'm Mark, and here's Mike. What's up, Mike?
Hey, what's going on, Mark? It's good to talk to you again.
You too. Awesome. Always good to talk. So today we're going to kick off the episode. It's a little bit dated, but we had some further thoughts on the fight with the MMA fighter, the tranny MMA fighter, Alana McLaughlin, and yeah, Mike, you want to kick this off?
Yeah, so here's what I think about the whole transgender, uh, guys going into girls' sports, right? I mean, there used to be a time back in when we were all kids where it just wasn't done, but um, everything winds up being just another taboo, another taboo, another taboo. And this
Mhm.
is one of them. So my opinion about this, the story that I would use is back when my wife and I were having kids. We had a few kids in a short period of time, and we would play this little game where, baby would start whimpering and stuff at whatever in the morning, and we'd play this little game of like, well, I'm just gonna pretend to be asleep because I'm dead tired, and she would pretend to be asleep, and then finally one of us would bail and get up and feed the kid. And so one time she gets up, she's like, yeah, F it, okay, I'm up. And she takes that bottle and warms it up, and then she jams it in the kid's mouth, and she just said, choke on it. You know, and I was like cracking up, but still trying to pretend to be asleep. And that's kind of the way I feel about this. Like, well, you guys wanted this, and by you guys, let's define that as not like women, right? There's this misconception that, well, you women wanted this. I think that's the wrong way to go. I think the way to look at it is, hey, everybody on the political spectrum is trying to get the high ground, right? The moral high ground, so that they can then beat their political opponents up and lob artillery against them, and then direct
Yeah.
the water flow, the money to them, right? That's what politics has always been about. And and in this case, we just stumbled upon this weird wrinkle in time where the high ground is standing up for transgenders' rights. So it's something like some population that's 0.00000 whatever percent of the population, right? And in my opinion, I'm like, okay, well, whatever, run with it, go for it, man. And the more women who get their skulls cracked open in the middle of the mat, at some point, is going to be the women who come in
Right.
and stop
Yeah.
this, right?
I think
I
I think that's definitely what would happen in this scenario.
Yeah, I'm of the believer that there's actually the women of our society that are going to pull our chestnuts out of the fire, because men have been around the Western world have been absolutely emasculated. They have no power. Men have zero power, none. They represent the fewest, the minority in terms of the number of promotions you see in corporate America, the number of high school grads, the number of undergraduate graduates. So there's more women that graduate from undergrad and masters and PhD than men. And it's been like that for, I don't know, half a decade or more. And so I'm like, all right, well, you guys have put us in our place. So y'all run with all this stuff. Y'all are the ones now in charge of everything. So go ahead. If you allow this, women's heads to get cracked open by tranny guys, then, you guys got to fix it.
I mean, I think that this at first, like I thought that was like a really horrible thing to let in a guy into the women's MMA fighting arena, just like everybody else. Most people virtually was like, "Wow, this is horrible. Why are you letting this guy in?" And obviously, the guy's gonna win, and that's pretty much what happened. And even after Alana McLaughlin won, she still got crap for it,
Mhm.
because and at the end of the day, she was kind of pretty bloodied up. So the way I see it is it's like, if you're gonna let this new category in, it should be like you should run the gauntlet with this new category. Like you should. I know in the fighting arena, you're allowed to accept or deny fights. They shouldn't be able to deny any fights. They should just run the gauntlet. If somebody says, I'm going to challenge you and this is a new category, I'm going to challenge a new category of a fighter. Because I was just thinking, like, in being Jewish myself, like in Judaism, you don't let somebody just in. It's not like other religions where you're just like, oh yeah, come on in. You have to run the gauntlet. You have to go through, you have to prove yourselves to like the rabbis. You have to prove that you're learning. You have to prove that you're going to actually take on the quote unquote fight, and represent what it is to be Jewish. So at the same time, if they're going to create a new category, that person has to also be able to like take on the fight, you know?
Yeah, well, for me, it's more of a I don't I don't see it. At first, I thought it was just a shocking thing, like, oh my God, I can't believe we're here. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Again, we always breaking the taboo one after another after another. And now I sort of look at this because I don't even care anymore. I don't give a damn about any of this stuff anymore.
yeah.
And I think it was, I forget the historian who said this, but he said, well, history is just one damn thing after another. We look back as students of history and say, oh, well, this happened because of that. And well, not really. We just sort of are all ambling along. And you look back and think that there's some linear thread running through it all, but it's really not. So this is just another one. I think our society is being run, it always has been, but we've recognized it more now. But it's being run by people who get off on pushing their fellow man around. And we all saw these kids in school that would just push you around. They would stomp on your foot and yell to the teacher and say, oh, Mark stomped on my foot. It hurts. Well, that's who's in office. And we see it now with the little local public tyranny at the school boards, school boards being like, well, yeah, we'll open
Oh,
this to the
right.
public, but you only get 60 seconds to speak and you got to run the Iron Man before you get here.
That was
And
The Matt Walsh whole like speech
yeah,
thing, and that's what he's trying to do in his district.
yeah, he's trying to convey that sentiment of like, hey, wait a minute, we were asleep at the wheel. Like John F. Kennedy wrote his book, Europe sleeps or while we were asleep, something like that. But basically, we just let these guys, because we had the good life, right? And we let these guys form all their little fiefdoms and rules and strip mine our assets away from us. And we're waking up to it now, but we're finding out as a people, like, damn, we can't even control a little rinky-dink school board, crying out loud. We have no power, and so people are getting pissed. I
Yeah.
read an analysis the other night, and it was some anon posting on some site, maybe like a Reddit or something like that. But it goes like this: hey, violent revolutions are always the product of young men being dissatisfied, always. And think about this right now: the young men in the US and Europe, they have been essentially told by the higher ups and the media and all that they're worthless, that you can do no right, you're just a bunch of predators and all that. And then, hey, if the average wage earner saved every nickel of their excess earnings starting from the beginning of the year, by the end of the year they were further away from buying a house than they were at the beginning of the year. And so
Hmm.
that's like right there the recipe for violent revolution. And the guy went on to say, like, I don't know who it is, but he went on to claim that violent revolutions are almost always the result of uh, rapacious landlords and property owners, and
Hmm.
they feel like they can just never get ahead. And so therefore, hey, I'm going to take it out, right? And the calming aspects of society, the methods that societies would use to calm these people down. The Romans did bread and circuses. Um, the most successful one is, well, we'll pair one man up with one woman and they raise a kid. And what a calming influence that is. It really does calm a young man down. But that's going away, right? We're seeing marriage just fall through the cracks.
Right.
The Middle Easterners do the multiple wife model, and that just leads to distrust. The South Americans, their model, I don't know if it's traditional or not, I don't know anything about it, but the Eurocentric model of one man one woman was always like the calming thing. But since that's going down, um going by the wayside, then the guy was claiming, well, it's video games, porn, and weed. That's what's being used successfully right now, or
That makes
sending guys
sense.
off
Yeah.
into war, you know? So now our wars are ending, and the end of major wars has always led to, like the end of the Cold War. Hey, look at all these excess soldiers. And there was this 10, 15-year period of mercenary armies going around the world, like wreaking havoc. So, anyways, we went from trannies to porn and weed really quick,
That's how we did. I mean, that's like the new generation, just shop to one thing another. But this power struggle, this creation of war, do you think that landlords just have too much power? Because I was just thinking that throughout this whole last 2 years, everybody loses their jobs, and the only people that are still collecting rent are the landlords. And
um,
what and I feel like that's also part of the government control, because why, if everybody, if we have no ability to bring in money, why should we still have to pay rent?
so because because number one, you signed a contract, right? If you sign
Well,
a
yeah,
contract,
yeah, but
West.
you also sign a contract to do business in other business realms, and then the government shuts that down. So
Oh yeah,
my
yeah.
other
So
my other business realms contract can be signed, and then the government can come and shut that down. But the the real estate contract can't be shut down or even stalled. What's the deal with
yeah.
that?
So I think a rental contract, quite honestly, is probably a pretty easy one to just walk away from with limited ramifications, right?
Hmm.
Um, but I think what's going on is this: you have, for the first time in all of recorded history, there's like this little chart. You can find it if you Google search it, but it goes like this. On one axis is like your median income. Okay, so
Yeah.
throughout time, here's what the median income has been for your typical working stiff in America. And then on the other axis, it's well, the percentage of your median income that's gone to rent, if that makes sense, right? So your typical dude, how many man hours is he spending on rent? And so hey, starting with Bill Clinton and then George W. Bush, like, oh, our national policy is everyone's going to own a home, yay! And then the national home ownership rate reached an all-time high, but that was off of like, well, you had to impose all these artificialities, such as prosecuting bankers with criminal law under Janet Reno if they didn't give loans to people who traditionally couldn't pay them back. And so that all-time high home ownership rate crashed down to like, wow, we haven't seen this low of an ownership rate in decades, right? Since we started keeping records of this in the 1960s. But the other side of that was, well, if you're not a homeowner, you're a renter. And so that excess supply of renters pushed up the rental price. Add to that zero interest rate policy and like a quintupling of the money supply in a quick order. Well, who gets printed money, by the way? It's not you, it's not me, it's not your guy on the street, it's not anyone there at Starbucks. The people who get their hands on it are the major financial intermediaries, so your Wall Street investment banks, your major commercial banks. Now their coffers are full of these digital currency units, and they're like, oh, we got to lend this out, right? But if you're
Yeah.
in, remember what we did in 2008? We took the major investment banks, and investment banks traditionally were just, hey, I've got this person here with a ton of capital, but then this person over here who invented this thing in his garage. Well, that guy in the garage, he's got a good idea and all this energy and everything, and it's revolutionary, but he just doesn't have capital. And so BAMO, the investment bank, comes in and matches the two. Like, and they would take a skim of that deal. And
Mm,
that's traditionally what they did. And they never, ever, ever, ever employed their own money. In fact, there was this
right.
one partner at Goldman Sachs who was there during the 1929 crash, and Goldman barely survived. And he was always there as a reminder to the youngins, hey, don't ever risk your own money. Let's never risk Goldman Sachs money.
Banks are
This,
smart like that. They're always using, they're like a drop shipper. They always use somebody else's money and make money off of the money that they're holding.
yeah, exactly. So So what happened over the years, though, is that the generations of success go by, and you forget about those lessons. Everyone's like, oh, the old wise one, he's just losing his marbles. You know what I mean?
Like
And
it's always about the stock market, or it's always about the housing market. Like you said, the 1929 and then 2008. Those are always turns in what's going on in the world. Why do we, if we give them less power, I don't know who we're giving less power. I guess we're giving the banks less power.
we're giving
Then
no. What we've done is we've done a disproportional allocation of money and power to absentee landlords named BlackRock,
hmm,
other major investment firms. So a guy that I know in the neighborhood, they run like investment properties. So him and his family are in the business of buying investment properties and either flipping them or just keeping them and collecting the rent. Well,
yeah.
he said, look, the real money is in us little local guys buying up just anything on the market and then
Mhm.
bundling it together and selling it to a hedge fund. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's like a totally unnatural thing. That activity should never exist in like nature, if you
But
will.
that kind of makes it makes it like all us little guys like unable to even buy a property ever, because
Oh
everything's
yeah.
just going to a hedge fund, and then they're turning into like multi-million dollar like apartments or business
Oh,
buildings or something like that, and like we
100%.
can't obtain anything.
Yeah, 100%. And look, none of that would have ever happened if we had just in 2008, 2007, just let these guys go to shit. Like I don't care about Goldman Sachs. I don't care about, I shouldn't pick on them. They're probably one of the better run places, but Bear Stearns and Morgan
Mhm.
Stanley, like, what do I care if they fall? They're not, if they're like such a part of our national infrastructure, well, then we need to just get rid of that part of our national infrastructure and change the way that we do our national infrastructure. Screw these guys. They're just gamblers, right?
Yeah.
Basically society absorbed all of their gambling debts, but they didn't participate in any of the gambling profits. So screw that. And so you've got massive amounts of printed money at pretty much below zero from a real sense interest rate. They got their hands on it. I didn't get my hands on it. When I do my Lowe's credit card,
Mhm.
it's issued by Synchrony Bank. And if you read the terms, if I don't pay that Lowe's card at the end of the month, it's like a 28.9% interest rate.
So much. Wow.
Meanwhile, you can go on the street and get a Synchrony Bank CD paying 0.1%. Man, what the hell? Right. So they're taking my money, paying me 0.1, and then turning around and charging me 29%. So that's essentially what's going on with these hedge funds like BlackRock and them owning all the residential real estate. So why are residential real estate properties being snatched up at like a moment's notice? Hey, I put my house on the market on Friday and it sold Saturday afternoon for like 50,000 over what our asking price was. Well, it's not like Bob and Nancy Smith moving in from Poughkeepsie, New York,
Well,
buying it.
I actually it is Bob and Nancy moving in from
Well,
New York, because
true.
like at
Yeah,
least
there's
I'm in
that.
Miami, so like, or I'm in Florida now, and there is not, people are living in apartments out here, or they're living in hotels basically, because they can't find apartments or houses to move into. The the market's been flooded. Like if a house goes on the market, it instantly gets grabbed up, and it instantly gets grabbed up at like multiples times the price you think you'd spend on it at this point.
Yeah, and add to that then the institutional buyers, right? And they, so if it was, let's say you're yeah, I've been to your place in Charlotte.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
let's say that was let's say you
Even
you
that got snatched. I mean, relatively speaking, that got sold pretty fast, I think.
Yeah. Well, let's do a little exercise. Let's say that you held that property and then rented it out because you moved, right?
Mhm.
You would not be the one to be rapacious about the rent. Like you wouldn't jack that thing up to the highest maximum point you could, because maybe you met the people, or it's a single mom or a family with kids, and you just wouldn't freaking do that. But if you're some nameless, faceless hedge fund, you don't care. You're just in it for the maximum amount allowable by the market, by law, by nature, right? And you just don't fucking care. So I think that that's what's going on to a large degree. And none of this would be possible if we didn't have a central bank just printing a fuckload of money at zero interest and giving it to their buddies, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's certainly not anything. By the way, this is nothing new. It's nothing new.
I know it's nothing new, but it's always it's current and relevant, and maybe it should be changed. I don't know how it could be changed. It should progress like, the tranny boxing arena or whatever. I don't know. I don't know what to do about it, really.
So
I'm just
here's what's
thinking
coming. I
it
pulled
looks
up
like
as
wait, I guess just
yeah.
to make a claim, it's just like it sounds like because this is going on over time, there's just going to be much more homeless people. That's it.
You know what? Yeah, and I don't think that any of these massive problems you can just point to one thing, right? That's a I think a fallacy of logic. Oh, there's this one thing that happened, and therefore we have a bunch of homeless people, right?
Right. That's true.
Um,
You can't.
but I think you can look back and just take an example. Sun Tzu, The Art of War, written over 2,000 years ago, and the guy he writes plenty of lines about hey, when you're engaged in a long drawn out military campaign away from home, especially a long distance from home, your population will be impoverished.
Hmm.
So in other words, hey, we didn't see tent cities until we started like trying to conquer Mesopotamia for 20 years, right? In the Hindu Kush. Places that Alexander and Caesar were like, you can have it. You know, we're not going into there. But
Yeah.
no, well, United States, yeah, we can do it because we're Americans, baby. And see how that went, right? But necessarily like those trillions of dollars, um, not to say that they would have gone to the people living in tent cities, right? But it's a confluence of things such as, oh hey, we blew our wad doing the
Yeah.
Cold War, which probably was just complete bullshit. Like if we had done nothing during the Cold War, would life be any different? Would geopolitics be any different? Probably not. So we blew our wad in the Cold War, and then we said, "Hey, we won the Cold War," when we really didn't. It just was they decided not to fight and they went home. And then, hey, let's deindustrialize. That sounds like a really good idea. Like, why would we want to produce things when we can just be a bunch of consumers, man, and a bunch of people working at Starbucks? So, so that broke the virtuous economic cycle. It's actually called the virtuous cycle, and it goes like this. Um, hey, first world countries, they fabricate things using, the natural resources from the third world. And the third world mines and produces natural resources with loans from the first world, right? The third world borrows from the first world and then provides stuff for the first world to fabricate and sell to itself. And then the profits wind up in the capital system to be done again and again and again. And recessions come when it's kind of like, okay, it's too much, right? Misallocation of resources, and then we would just start over again. But that got short circuited in the 90s with, hey, screw it, we don't want to have factories anymore, man. Let's just go and maybe pollute in someone else's backyard, which I guess there's a logic to that. Like, fuck them, let them all get cancer, over there in Asia. But it broke the cycle, and that's kind of where we started seeing guys hang out on the with cardboard placards saying, hey, homeless vet, right, help me out. And they're on every freaking intersection now, all across the nation. Then the tent cities started popping up. So that's like one thing. And then you add to that the impoverishment from the military complex and all. I don't want to get into that, but but and then education is a freaking wreck. On and on and on it goes, but things aren't working to our satisfaction. And part of the reason why I love massive contentious politics is because all that stuff gets aired out, right? I hate this whole like um Mitch McConnell era or Trent Lott era bipartisanship, as if people want bipartisanship. I
Right. I
think
mean,
that
even the White House said the other day, they were like, well, if you guys have any, if Republicans have any ideas, we'll stop talking about them and start actually giving us some real ideas to put into action. And I was like, okay, so like we've done that on like almost every single subject, and you guys just ignore or try to battle everything we say, including like building a wall, which would definitely stop, horse cops from beating down Haitians at the border or whatever, if that's what they're doing, and that's not even what they're doing.
Well, I mean,
So it's
honestly,
like,
I think that the Border
but
Patrol suffers from a lack of imagination. If they put transgender horse cops up there, boy, that would be just freaking awesome. You know what I'm saying? Problem solved.
yeah, yeah. Actually, it's funny. It's like it's interesting you mentioned that because Adam Carolla had a whole thing of like how to stop the. I don't know if we've talked about this before, but how to stop the BLM riots or something like that
Okay.
was to just put like, and I don't actually think this would work now. It would work maybe back then when they were going on, but his whole thing was like hire an actor that was riding a horse, and then hire an actor that's a BLM rioter, and then go have the rioter go punch the horse, and then like do the whole like, you know, what's that movie where the guy punches the horse?
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
you
Mel
know,
Brooks.
Mel Brooks,
Damn it, Rock Ridge, Blazing Saddles.
Blazing Saddles, right, right, and go have the BLM rioter punch the horse in the face, not the horse cop, and then that would go all over the news like you abused horses, and then they would be like, well, these BLM people are abusing horses, and I guess like that would turn into like against BLM because it's worse to abuse animals than it is to abuse
Yeah,
any
but
these
the
days.
only problem with that, I think, is that there exists a I think it was Scott Adams. If you read one of his books about persuasion, he
Mhm.
says in the pecking order of persuasion tactics, pointing out hypocrisy is like the lowest one. Like it
Mm.
doesn't work. Um,
I think that's the only thing we have to do right now is to point out hypocrisy, because everything, even that case, is hypocritical to this current situation. So, like I said, that situation might have maybe worked last year, but now they're the government was like, oh well, fine, even though the horse patrol at the border was not hitting the cops or hitting the Haitians um, that are coming into our country. Let's get rid of the horses because that's now a problem. You
so
know?
I got a different take on the whole immigration thing, by the way.
Okay.
First of all, like, hey, we're all sons or grandsons or whatever of immigrants. I get that, right? And the difference between now and then is, well, back then, you could just arrive on the shores and go find a plot of land
Mm,
and just be like, oh, okay, well, this is mine. So there was plentiful land, and we need people for the factories to treat as, basically like indentured servants. So, okay, cool. Life's different now. Like my commute fucking sucks. There's too many people here. So it's definitely different,
yeah.
right? But so national strategy, okay, and we're talking like our people. You take away all of the individual viewpoints about like whether people have a good life or not, and you're just talking about the sweep of history. Hey, this American culture, right? If it was written about 1,000 years from now, this American culture, just, man, they were so good because they had certain advantages, right? So let's talk about those.
Yeah.
One of our advantages is our land mass and our defense perimeter, right? Two oceans, which are basically like continents with water in them. So two oceans. We have excellent weather. We have massive rivers, right? A massive river system that kind of provides for transportation of massive amounts of goods, like 40 times cheaper than it is over land. And
Hmm.
then, gigantic amounts of irrigation water for the largest or second largest grain belt in the world, right? But the largest grain belt in the world, the Russian steppes, they don't have a single river that doesn't freeze. So they can't afford to transport that shit everywhere. So those are like major league advantages, right? And that leads to the excess capital in our civilization floating around to finance these things called navies. And it's the Navy, a Navy will guarantee longevity for a civilization, okay? The other thing is this. when you have a lower wage rate relative to another civilization, you're going to win. You're just going to beat them. You're going to outproduce them because they're younger. You're going to wage. You're going to beat them on wages, right? Because they're younger. Younger people make fewer wages. So if you really think about it, our immigration system is it is what it is. People think it's broken, but I think our masters kind of think, well, look, we need that competitive advantage in the wage rate and demographically a younger age, right? And that'll produce soldiers for our armies and stuff if we need to use them. I think that's what our immigration system's all about.
So
Because
that's what Democrats are arguing. They're saying uh, it's just been historically part of our American value system to just, leave the borders open, let them come if they want to come.
yeah, so the problem becomes, well, it's got to be orderly, right? And we still don't want to leave ourselves open to massive pandemics. I mean, that's got to be a thing. So it's got to be orderly, it's got to be safe.
Right.
And back in the day, like when my mom came to this country, there wasn't really as much of a welfare state as there is now, but there was one. And the mentality back then was never take a dime, right? You sing for
Yeah.
your supper. And the wave of immigrants from in the 1870s to the 1920s was gigantic, and it was largely from Western Europe, and those people largely worked, and there was zero welfare system other than the voluntary system, the sisters of the whatever chapel. And then land was abundant, right? Land was, and jobs were abundant. So we're trying to piggyback off the same exact type of immigration system that we had back then, but in a totally different world. The same way as it's like, wait a minute, let me get this straight. We have an entire taxation system based off of us being like an industrial nation of people working in factories. So our IRS hasn't morphed, hasn't made the changeover yet, which is why Amazon can get away with like, hey, well, yeah, we made like $230 billion, but we don't pay any taxes because we're not a factory. Fuck you. And your tax regime is set up for General Motors, like, going through cost of goods sold and inventory and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
anyways,
So were you saying, going back to a previous point, is that because the immigrants are coming over, they're actually controlling or moderating the pay rate gap, like, and it's maybe a good thing.
well, I'm not saying good or bad. I'm saying that's just the strategic outlook of the people who, are politicians. And for better or worse, let's be honest, they have been hired by society to do things such as, hey, on a day-to-day basis, right, keep the lights running and all that, and the traffic lights on, but on a grand strategic stage, thinking in terms of like the next 50 or 100 years, yeah, we've hired these people to do that. And I think that I'm just guessing that is their strategy,
Yeah.
which is keep our wage rate relatively competitive against the rest of the world. And if we have to do it this way, then we'll do it this way because, Bob and Nancy Smith are not having 4 kids anymore. They're not having 3 kids. They're having like 1 or 2 kids to barely replace themselves. So we're going to have to bring it in from elsewhere. So if you think of it from a grand strategy point of view, I mean, I'm not going to argue with it, right? Now you get into the nitty gritty of like, well, who voted for the demographic change of this country? Okay, well, now you're getting into some territory that needs to be debated. I think cutting off the debate of that is a bad thing. And I think that boiling it down to, you're a racist, or I don't want to be called a racist, so I'll just go along with it. That serves nobody either. We should have a national discussion about, hey, we should have immigration on this scale, and it should be orderly as, like that. They all have to be screened. And let's be honest, like what, your great grandparents had a PhD, they spoke the language. Yeah, right. They came in not speaking the language and penniless, and they had a work ethic that, blazes your dumbass work ethic. And so let's bring those people into our bloodstream. Like that's the way I feel about immigration, but there's got to be a fucking limit, crying out loud, and they got to live somewhere, right? So at a point of things are getting expensive, housing expensive, cars are expensive, our schools are bursting with 35 kids per classroom. Our sewer systems, just basic things like the sewer system of Houston could barely handle all the people that came from Hurricane Katrina. And so what's an upgrade of the sewer system cost? That's
So,
like bankruptcy level stuff.
so like on a certain level, they are controlling and keeping the wage gap in control by doing kind of the bitch work or the lower end jobs that other people don't want to do. But at another sense, they are creating more flooding of problems, like backing up sewer system, or like where's everybody going to live? Like what's at a certain point, our country's going to be bit like there's going to be too many people here than that can fit.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, there's that. I think what's going to wind up happening, nobody knows this, but in 1920 or 1921,
Mhm.
the United States cut off all immigration. There was 0.0 immigration from like 1921 till the 1965 Ted Kennedy's Immigration Act,
So why did they do that?
because we were stuffed and the sentiment became like, hey, you know what, we got enough. Okay, the Industrial Revolution sort of plateaued out there, we couldn't produce any more things, and technology started coming in and doing things such as steam, and then internal combustion, right? Henry
Mhm.
Ford, interchangeable parts, things like that. Well, interchangeable parts was from the 1700s, but um, what did Henry Ford, the assembly line. So machines started taking a lot of those, grunt work jobs away. And there were movements back then like, hey, this is BS, let's destroy the machines, right? Um, and so mankind, we kind of went through our industrial revolution. We went through our building skyscrapers revolution. By the way, the Empire State Building was built in something like 400 days. Like you
Oh,
could never ever do that today.
that's
Yeah, through all the
crazy.
red tape, right? And speaking of Adam Carolla, he's like, hey, my house was built in like 1907 out there on the San Andreas Fault without all of the hurricane ties and all the extra building codes that we've layered on. And he's like, my house is perfectly fine. And all this other shit that you do, that you force builders to do, is just worthless. Yeah, it's just
Mhm.
worthless. It's red tape worthlessness. So I think what winds up happening is the sentiment by 1920 was that America's full, we've had enough. We got to absorb these people. And let's not forget what happened in 1918 all the way to 1920. Oh crap, we had a gigantic pandemic. It was a worldwide Spanish flu, they called it. And something like 50 to 55% of the people who came to Ellis Island were turned away. Like so Ellis Island, you didn't just show up. You were on a ship, and the ship's doctor and the captain had a gigantic responsibility that if you had a cough, you weren't getting off the ship.
So,
And then
so
you
it's
went to the little
virtually the same exact thing that's going on now
bingo.
happened in 1918,
Yeah,
and
and
with the
so
same progression. Like, okay, there's a pandemic, and then there's people coming to the country, and we're well, like now we're not turning away people, but like they did then. Now we're kind of just letting them in. That's the
yeah,
only difference.
that's gonna be a problem, by the way. So just the Chimera pandemic, right? So a chimera is a what mythological creature that could basically destroy the world.
Okay,
And so
let's hear about it. What's Chimera?
yeah, so every couple of years, the media and the government come along and say, "Oh my God, we're all gonna die from SARS. We're all gonna die from MERS, from Zika, from bird flu, from swine flu,
Mhm.
from
Right,
yeah."
from global
And
warming.
so yeah, so they're trying to say like this chimera, this bird of destruction is, oh my God, it's gonna take us out unless we do this right now. And it always involves giving up money and power. And they've said that COVID is the chimera. And the rumor was like, well, maybe it came out of a bioweapons lab, right, and all that. And I'm thinking, well, if it did, it's a shitty bioweapon because it didn't really work. But
Hmm.
but the real chimera that we're ignoring is that our civil population has been largely untouched from some of these third world diseases that can wipe out entire cities. because we've just haven't had any contact, right? And it's the same thing that happened with like Europe for 2000 years was dealing with pandemic after pandemic after pandemic, and they basically built up this antibody system of survivors, right? They just had those antibodies. But when they came to North America, the indigenous population got something like 2000 years worth of that on them all at once, right? An isolated population. And the Europeans were like, well, we didn't mean to, dude. We don't even understand this stuff. It just happened. And so I feel like the reverse can happen. And there are some groups out there that are like, yeah, let's get it on, man. Let's get rid of these people here, which we're now the native population. Let's get rid of them so we can supplant them. And so if you look at these like massive sweep of history sort of things, I think that unchecked and unchecked immigration, that's like the number one risk. And then number two is, well, demographics. Hey, everything's cultural, everything's race, right? Oh my God, you can't get away from it. Every
Yeah.
commercial you see is like, oh Jesus Christ.
I was playing chess yesterday, and I was just like, how is it not out yet that like chess is like the most racist game out there?
Is it
Like,
really?
just
Like, I don't get it.
well, because first of all, the thing you start, I was just thinking about it. I mean, it's probably other people have probably talked about it, but you start off with black and white, and you pick a hand randomly like this, and then you like, if you land white, you start off first. So the white team starts off first. I'm like, I don't know. It's just something, because there's been so much talk about race in the news and like whatever lately, it automatically registered that this is like a super racist game. It was like
I got it.
it like conditioned me to think that.
Okay. Well, everything's race. However, it's not taboo if you're black to be like, well, I want the black race to do well. If you're Mexican, you're like, well, I fly the Mexican flag and I want the Mexican people to do well.
That's
Well,
true.
try to say
That's
that
true.
if you're white. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
what's wrong with wanting your own race to do well and to continue? There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. So given the fact that there's nothing wrong with that, no rational person, unless there's some moonbat racist, would say, oh yeah, I don't want that race to do well. I want this race to do well. Like every one of them has a right to survive and to propagate.
I guess the only
And
problem is when you're beating down another race in order
bingo.
for you to survive. Like there are some, I think we mentioned this before for sure, but there are some just, categories I don't need to get involved with. Like I don't care about like Japanese culture, so I don't even approach it. I don't need to go to a parade. I don't need to support it. It's not that I don't like Japanese people. They're great, but they just have nothing to do with me. Like,
Yeah. So, well, speaking of Japanese, I think they got it right, man. They're like, hey, no race or no immigration. They have no immigration. None.
maybe I do like Japanese culture a little bit, but like a minute. It's not like I need to
I know what you're
go.
saying. Yeah. You're not
Like
going to walk in. You're not going to go to their parade, like you said. But there should be an actual conversation in this country about like, hey, should we totally change the demographics? Like, who gave permission for that? Right? Nobody voted for it, and everybody hates it, by the way. But it's just being imposed on them. So there's going to be a backlash against all of this. And I think that I don't know if there's going to be some Chimera virus unleashed, but it's gotten so freaking ugly right now. And what I think is a shame is the following. So you and I, our generation and the generations below us have been told from birth, Martin Luther King, right? So I was born in the 70s. He did his thing beforehand, and it's been strong ever since then in terms of like what we're taught. And our generations and the ones below us are the ones who truly are colorblind. We don't think of things, white, black, Asian, whatever. They were all just buddies. They're just friends. And the only time race ever came up was in high school when all of our teachers were like, oh yeah, by the way, did you know you guys are supposed to like see each other's differences and kind of hate each other? And that's where all the tribalism started in my life, in my experience. But
Yeah.
you really did have, you saw the interracial marriage and all those beautiful children that come from interracial marriages. I'm a product one. I'm interracial, and I think it's
I
a
thought you
beautiful.
were white. Honestly, I didn't know you were interracial.
Yeah,
Like you.
it's like a crazy, it's like a crazy ass mix no one's ever heard of. But yeah, so interracial, multiracial kids, like we don't care. We don't fit into any box, and I don't really assign myself any box because I don't really care. I just go through life. I'm like, look, I just don't want to even be in the conversation because I could give a damn, right? Both of my parents loved me, and both of my parents were the same, and so I kind of equate all races to be about the same. And but then so you actually had these young kids living like the 10 points of Martin Luther King.
Mm,
Then how was that moment used? How was that if you think about it in grand terms, it's the only time in the history of our species where that's happened. I mean, that's huge. The only time in the history of our species, people in certain parts of the world were not like seeing each other by race and lashing out and protecting their own race and all that. And how was the moment used? For massive, massive race baiting. It's worse than I've ever seen it in my life. And so,
yeah.
what's going to happen? The shameful thing is future generations have been will be snake bitten, and they'll be like, oh, okay, well, I'll just go back to the way it always was. So mankind has officially squandered that beautiful part of the history of our species, and I think it'll probably won't come back for another a couple hundred years. What a shame, you know.
Hmm.
And so you got to wonder whether that can ever happen, whether we can truly mesh. Maybe historians like 1,000 or 3,000 years from now are going to kind of scratch their heads about it, because everyone then will be this sort of like, we'll all be the same, right? We'll all be mixed up officially.
Will we? I don't know. This kind of goes back to our last conversation, where are things going to go back to normal, or are things going to just blend together? Are people going to forget about the pandemic a little bit? Remember, like who's going to be wearing masks, who's not going to be wearing masks? I think it's going to be the same. I don't know. I think just the
Holy crap!
cycle
Like,
just
holy
goes
crap! I
around. Like
can't.
nothing like evens out. It
Right, you're talking about harmonic balance, yin and yang,
it's
equilibrium.
like the
No,
stocks. I mean, some people are going to be really racist and some people aren't, and then some people aren't going to even care. Just this, yeah, three
yeah,
thousand
well,
years.
so be it. You know what I mean? So be it. I again, like I'm in the category of people who just doesn't give a shit. I'm just trying to live my life, and all these things I think about all the time, but it's taken a long time to sort of dissociate the effect that it has on my emotions, if you know what I mean. Um, and so I just walk, most of the time I just sort of laugh at this stuff, but I'm going through the stores nowadays, and it went from like in the very beginning, very few people in masks, then everyone's in a mask except for me. And then and if they ask me to put a mask on, I just leave politely. Like, I don't cause a scene or nothing. I just leave. I'm
Mm,
like, no, I don't wear those things. Fuck you.
yeah.
Um,
I,
God would have put it like a flap over our noses if he wanted us to like restrict our breathing, right?
well, he did.
And then it
He put
went
like nose
to,
hairs, but yeah, like we
yeah, then it went
talked about. But
to nobody wearing a mask again. And right, and now everyone's back in a mask. I'm like, it's like whiplash.
it
It's whiplash.
really, you could say that it doesn't have to affect you, but at a certain point, it actually does. The global popularity does actually affect everybody, like what's in at the moment, because it's completely changed, like your mindset. It's like you go around and you're looking at people wearing masks. But when I look at people wearing masks, I think of other countries like Japan, like SARS. They're communist, like these other communist controlled countries. They're like, the mask doesn't just represent like, oh, we're around the disease. It also represents a silence of like, you're silenced. That's the way I see it when I see massive people in masks, that that they look like they're not allowed to speak. It's like a muzzle.
It's
Um,
very ancient pharaoh and peasant to me, and slave to me.
mhm.
that's kind of what goes through my mind when I see all this. And the other thing is this, when you're young, you you're not wise, you're not experienced, and you're starting to learn at a rapid pace how to pick up on things such as facial cues, right?
Mhm.
Non-verbal communication. So if you're, let's say, a senior in high school, you've now missed the better part of 2 years of that development. And
Yeah,
that's serious development. Like that's how you're able to tell if you're getting taken advantage of, lying. If a girl's just playing with you, you can read it in her mind, in her face, right? And then like
maybe you
after,
still can't read it after many years, but like still like that.
yeah, you know what I mean. So these
Yeah,
kids are
I got
losing out
you.
on a major part of their development. And like in our public school system right now, we've got this gigantic fight going on. So the school board basically it was unanimous and they said, all right, well, we're going to go mask optional. If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. Otherwise, it's free country, and there's only one of eight. There are
Mhm.
only one of eight counties doing that, right? In the
Yeah,
state of North Carolina. And so the city council,
sure.
they are coming down hard on these guys and on the school board. The school board's an elected official and the city council is an elected official. Neither one is the boss of the other, but the city council controls the money.
Right.
And the city council was sitting there saying, listen, there's like a $50 million government check in it for us if we force kids back into masks. And the school board's like, not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. But the school board, it was a 9-0 vote, right? And then the next one was a 7-2 vote. And I hear it's gotten like really contentious between these people, as it should be, right? But these guys are eventually going to fall, and kids will go right back into masks. And I'm like, listen, at a time where the way I feel about this whole mask and COVID and vaccination thing, this is really ugly. This is going to sound really, really ugly.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay, so it's
Bring the
basically a
heat.
it's basically a bunch of old baby boomers being a bunch of selfish bastards like they always have been. Oh,
Mm,
my health, my feelings, my sense of security is the only thing that freaking matters. I don't care if your grandkid or if your kid is in a freaking mask. These are the same people that are like, hey, I don't care if the government falls. You're giving me my social security. If it means I impoverish the younger generation, so be it. I've actually heard them say, I don't care. You guys have time. I don't have time left. And I'm like,
mm.
well, you certainly had time to vote for politicians that stole every freaking nickel. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Out of the trust fund. You know what I mean? Anyways,
yeah. That's a big idea. I mean, it's like the people who have always been in control are still in control, and they're still making up excuses like saying that they never had the power, but they've always had the power. Really, that's kind of
yeah,
the bottom line.
yeah. So I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is I can't wait for these baby boomers to just fade away. Meaning nothing mean, but like, god damn, you have bent our society to your will being since the day you popped out. And it's
That's
been all
true.
about you and everything that you've wanted. And you know what? To get a few extra points in your 401k, you outsource every freaking job in our national economy, leaving nothing left for your kids and grandkids, right? And then you have the temerity to tell these millennials, like, well, back in my day, all I did was just pull myself up by the bootstraps and look at the newspaper and get a job. Uh-huh. Yeah, you
Right. Yeah.
outsource every single small town in America, you asshole.
I don't think it's that, like, it's kind of that easy, but it's not that easy anymore. Or at least I don't think it's ever been that easy in my generation. So, uh,
Oh no,
anyway,
no, definitely not.
it's like, I mean, you've heard my story. I've gone all the way around the country. I've talked to many people and just doing the entrepreneurial thing. And it's a roller coaster ride, man. It is, it's not easy of just like go to work and everything's cool. I was actually just thinking about this the other day. It's like you go to work, you want to have like relationships with people at work and you want to be like friends with them and stuff, but you also want to like you're doing the same thing. You're like you're like communicating with people to try to obtain a goal, to make a living for yourself and also live a happy life. And if and I was just thinking the problem with the work social dynamic is that like there might come a time where policy goes against it. So even though everybody's just trying to like make a fair living or something together, there's eventually going to be a battle, you know, when you cross a specific line.
Oh, you think
And that's
what lines are you thinking, man?
I mean, I don't know, whatever line it is, like it could be like you cross a specific policy line, you start obtaining more money than the person next to you. Um, maybe somebody doesn't like what you said, so it's like it becomes a hierarchy of like who's right battle. Um, but
Yeah,
even
so I
even
got a
even
little advice for people in the workplace.
yeah.
One day, like one of the ladies was like, "Hey, you say the exact same thing every Monday when we ask you, what'd you do over the weekend?" And it's always like, just sort of did some work around the house, some time with family, stuff like that. And it's just real innocuous. Okay, here's why.
Hmm.
You say, "Oh man, we freaking blew it out of the water at this music festival, blah blah blah." Okay, well, the 50-something-year-olds with a miserable marriage and miserable life. Okay, now you're on the opposite side of them, right? Now they kind of secretly hate you. It's just human nature, right? If
Yeah.
you are like, so no matter what you say, there's always another category of employee that sort of is either jealous or resentful of the life that you're living somehow, or your life that you're living is a reflection back to them that their life sucks. And so what you got to do is just be like, Mr. Hey, he just said that like 2 seconds ago, and it was so boring. I've already forgotten what he said. That's the way you gotta be in with your colleagues. You cannot be anything but that. The second you start to step outside of that, now, for better or worse, right? You are
Mhm.
who you are. I think that in the workplace, you should have an identity. My identity tends to be, no matter what, I do actually say what's on my mind. I don't have a filter, and I don't mean it. I don't work that way because I'm trying to be Mr. Convince everyone of the way that I do things, but
Right.
it takes no energy to just be yourself. Whereas trying to be somebody else, you got to remember who you are to each different person and all that, and your customers. I just put it out there. So customers always asking me like, "Hey, they're trying to thread the needle of like, hey, how do I get this guy's political opinion?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'll just tell you
Mm,
straight up. I'm
right,
not trying to
right.
hide anything." And I mean, I'm relatively right wing on most things. On other things, I'm pretty damn, I guess you would call left wing, where I don't give a shit. But people are like, "Huh, it's not what I had thought, but I respect you,
Yeah,
people
yeah,
respect me."
definitely.
So that's my identity. And the other identity is that, I'm always in a suit. This whole thing with, casual Fridays, or we just did, hey, don't ever wear a tie again. I remind people when they mention that, like, "Hey, why are you in a suit and a tie, man? Don't you know we've gone to this like business casual look?" Nothing wrong with it if you do it right, to be quite honest. And I think society has changed. But I'm like, well, back when I first started working, man, it was like 1997, and all these guys. We had a bunch of Anderson Consulting guys in the building, and by like the late '90s, they were all out of their Brooks Brothers suits, and they were in their business casual. They still look good, but business casual. You could definitely see the difference. And
It's
and
not
then
it's not the
then
same.
half of them were fired after the economic meltdown, and then they're right back in their right back in their suits. But by 2005, 2006, right back in business casual. And then half of them were fired in the 2008 meltdown. So I'm like, not that I think being in a suit really is going to save your job, but let me just kind of skip that step so I don't have to buy another wardrobe. But maybe make it part of your identity that you dress pretty good, and you can get a decently priced suit at Men's Warehouse. Not that it's like $199, and
I
just
would
wear it
say,
well.
yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, maybe not exactly about the suit, but because I like rarely ever wear a suit, and when I do, I don't really wear a tie. So it's like somebody bought me a tie like 5 years ago. I've maybe worn it once. Um, but I think there is something to say about the consistency of what you're doing. So like if you're
Have
gonna
a style, yeah.
just have a style, if you're gonna do the suit and tie thing, do the suit and the tie thing. But if you're not gonna do it, if you want to do the casual business thing, I would
I
say
mean,
I have a
yeah,
consistent casual business thing going on
yeah. It
for
depends
all
on the.
occasions. You know,
It
it's like
depends. If the bank's gonna send me out to like an auto body shop, yeah, I'm
mhm.
not gonna go in there in a freaking suit with a pocket square and all that.
Okay, right. Well, the pocket square is, I guess, there's an occasion for the pocket square. But anyway, on that note, we've been talking for a little while today, so I
Yeah,
think we
dude.
could probably end on that note. If there's any, is there any final thoughts that you want to
Yeah,
share with whoever's listening to this, if anybody's listening to this?
yeah. So
Like,
so maybe this sets up the next podcast. So just give me like a minute or two to read this and see if it sounds familiar.
okay,
This is from the 1932 Franklin Roosevelt inaugural address. Okay, and I'm going to start kind of in the first part of it. So he says, "quote More important, a host of unemployed citizens face the grim problem of existence, and an equally great number toil with little return. Only a foolish optimist can deny the dark realities of the moment. Yet our distress comes from no failure of substance. We are stricken by no plague of locusts. Compared with the perils which our forefathers conquered because they believed and were not afraid, we have still much to be thankful for. Nature still offers her bounty, and human efforts have multiplied it. Plenty is at our doorstep, but a generous use of it languishes in the very sight of the supply. Primarily, this is because the rulers of the exchange of mankind's goods have failed through their own stubbornness and their own incompetence, have admitted their failure and abdicated. Practices of the unscrupulous money changers stand indicted in the court of public opinion, rejected by the hearts and minds of men. True, they have tried, but their efforts have been cast in the pattern of an outworn tradition. Faced by the failure of credit, they have proposed only the lending of more money. Stripped of the lure of profit by which to induce our people to follow their false leadership, they have resorted to exhortations, pleading tearfully for restored confidence. They know only the rules of a generation of self-seekers. They have no vision, and when there is no vision, the people perish. The money changers have fled from their high seats in the temple of our civilization. We may now restore that temple to the ancient truths. The measure of the restoration lies in the extent to which we apply social values more noble than mere monetary profit." Holy crap. Is that not
wow.
today or what?
That is amazing summary of like everything that's going on today. That's
Yeah, and
great. That's crazy.
I
Um,
invite everyone listening to read the whole thing and or play the voice. It's wonderful. But essentially, we've been through this chapter before. We've been through the shortages. Like we're starting to see empty shelves again. Okay, it's not a natural occurrence. It's, in my opinion, it's artificial. It's
mm,
artificial due to incompetence and this political. Everything's got to be political. So if you want full shelves, we're going to make sure there's empty shelves just to punish you. All these money changers have to be thrown out of the temple.
that's what everybody's saying. I mean, even like they're talking about jobs, they're talking about diseases, they're saying like that it's hard to live in this world. It's really not. I mean, there's more jobs than ever. It's like there's more even with a non-acceptance part of society, there is also more of an acceptance of anything going on in society than there's ever been at
Yeah,
this
so in
also.
closing, I think that I'm actually very optimistic about things. I'm very optimistic. Maybe we'll talk about this about the younger generations, the millennials and the Zoomers. I think that they're going to be the ones. As much as people rag on them, I do not. I think they're highly virtuous age groups, and I think they're wonderful. The ones I come across are absolutely wonderful. So maybe we can talk about that next time because that definitely is counter, I guess, conventional wisdom. But I think
totally.
we're going to be fine. At the end of all of this, we're going to be fine. But I do believe that there have to be recriminations for all this.
Hmm.
And recriminations meaning like, you know what, throw them all out and let history forget these people.
Yeah, definitely.
So, all right,
Okay,
man, it's always
cool,
good
man.
catching up with you.
Yeah, you too, Mike. Thanks again. Everybody who's listening, this is On the Mark podcast. I guess we're working on the name. Uh, and tune in next time.
See you, buddy.
Take it easy, Mike.
Yep.
Peace.